This time on Bob World Builder, we discuss D&D Birdfolk and why level 1 players should be able to fly in Dungeons & Dragons. Hey gang, Bob here. Welcome to Bob World Builder, the D&D channel where beginners and pros come together to improve their game. Have you ever had a dream where you could fly? Have you ever been playing a fantasy RPG where almost anything is possible, but yet your GM forbade the flying races? In this video, we're going to review the flying folk of D&D, specifically the Aarakocra, the Kenku, and my homebrew birdfolk, the Manu, now out on Dungeon Masters Guild. And stick around so you can learn how to get a free copy of that supplement. This is part 1 of a series called Let's Fix It, where we discuss homebrew options that can make D&D even more fun. Hit the subscribe button so you won't miss the next one. I first read about the Aarakocra, the eagle folk of D&D, in the Elemental Evil Player's Companion, when my partner, Grace, was preparing to run the Princes of the Apocalypse module. And my gut reaction to the Aarakocra's abilities was, whoa, that 50 feet of flying speed seems really powerful, and I think a lot of DMs are kind of intimidated by that ability. At the time, I wasn't particularly interested in playing one. I already kind of had my character idea fleshed out, but I remember that Grace and I talked about it, and both of us were a little unsure about anybody actually using that as a race in this adventure. Sometime later, Volo's Guide to Monsters comes out and gives us the Kenku, a non-flying crow/raven birdfolk. The lore and abilities for these races draw heavily on actual adaptations of birds, with the Kenku having a little more specificity toward crows and ravens. Overall, these two provide great role-playing potential and creative solutions that players can come up with rather than swinging a sword at their problems. So, about 6 months ago, I got really interested in the idea of a vulture folk race. That's because at the outdoor education facility where I work, we run a program about the really interesting adaptations vultures have and use in the real world. But quickly that got me thinking, why aren't there more birdfolk in D&D drawing on the awesome adaptations that large groups of birds actually have? These would make some really cool player races. So right away, I homebrewed a bunch of these different kinds of birdfolk and even pulled the Kenku in all as sub-races of Aarakocra. But when things started becoming more detailed and the lore I was coming up with started to drift a little bit from what the Aarakocra are described as, I decided to just make it a homebrew race and eventually to publish it on the DM's Guild. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Dungeon Masters Guild is a website where anybody can share their original content that they create for Dungeons & Dragons. Check out the description below for links to the DM's Guild and DriveThruRPG, a related site. So before I bring up my actual supplement here, let me say a big thank you to the artists who generously lent their art to this project. Getting really cool looking art that I liked a lot was a fun part of it and also very new to me, as this is the first document I'm publishing on the DM's Guild, but I really can't thank those guys enough. And there are links to all of their social medias in the description below, and we'll see them in a second on the actual document. Alright, so here it is, guys. Take Flight, a birdfolk race with 6 unique subraces for 5e. Let's zoom in here and just scroll through a bit. So these first couple pages are what you'll actually see in a preview on the DM's Guild, but we're going to go a little bit further than that. Alright, my little intro. We all dream of flying, our feet softly lifting as weightlessness takes over. Role-playing is the simplest way for anyone to realize this dream, and this supplement makes the experience of flight achievable at any level through several birdfolk sub-race options based on real-world flyers. Fly, you fools! Alright, and so here's the credits. That's me, Robert Mason. You're already watching this, probably, on Bob World Builder on YouTube. The editors here are my partner, Grace, Steven, my prodigy, first player, now DM, and Kelsey, who's another player and friend of mine. Again, all the artists, these links are going to be in the description below, but I highly recommend checking out their work. They're really amazing, each one of them. And, a thank you for anybody here who actually decides to purchase this or, reminder, ends up getting it for free. Because in any case, you're supporting community-created content. Alright, the legal stuff right there. Some other amazing artwork here. And here we go. The Manu. Eyes on the skies, my friends. Manu fly here. Omira whispered to her companions as they stalked into the enormous desert canyon. Before anyone could scoff at the old superstitious gnome's thousandth warning, a wide shadow darted over the dust. Silhouetted against the high sun, 5 pakaroo circled above, blood-soaked beaks of their unfeathered heads glinting sharply. Isolated in the corners of their once wide range, the bird-like Manu have lived by the same customs for millennia, inhabiting the highest, furthest, and most savage territories. These distant people are seldom seen or heard, but every old storyteller knows a fable or two about Manu, making them a fireside fascination of many adventurers. So in my head, the Manu are these very rare, uncommonly seen peoples who, again, have lived the same way for a long, long time, and that makes many other races kind of superstitious of them, because it's really unlikely that they've had an interaction with a Manu personally. Let's continue, and I'm not going to read this all word for word. You can do that on your own in the review if you'd like, but here's a section, birds of a feather, just about how divergent the subraces actually are. Again, they're based on very different real-world groups of birds. But for the sake of simplicity and realism, I thought it made sense just to have them as subraces of the same race. And I even included a note, just a little lore side note down here. Although most Manu would cackle at the notion of being so closely related to one of the accepted subraces, let alone Aarakocra or Kenku, many scholars agree that all of these groups share a common ancestor. It just made sense to me that way. And so in this section here, we see some things similar to the Aarakocra in that they're very fastidious. They're highly concerned with cleanliness and being free of parasites and disease, going so far as to elect caretakers who not only watch over the eggs, but also the elderly of the tribe. That's kind of a product of their very short lifespan. And one difference here is that the Aarakocra kind of have no sense of ownership whatsoever. It's an entirely foreign concept to them. With the Manu, they understand ownership, but it's more communal, so they kind of share everything amongst their tribe. But the idea of owning any living thing is completely taboo, and as I've written here, fatally unfortunate for many trespassing adventurers deemed threatening by scouts or elders. Imprisonment is a far worse fate than death in the eyes of many Manu. So you're kind of more likely to be killed if you're wandering through their territory than to be captured, because even the idea of holding a person, against their will, that is a mortal sin to the Manu. So for any Manu, they are highly attuned to the sounds of their surroundings. And so in my mind, they're kind of almost constantly singing to themselves, kind of chirping along. And to the untrained ear, it probably wouldn't sound very melodious, because in their heads, they're kind of filling in the gaps in the song that already exists all around them. Okay, and Manu names. So they're very dependent on not only the mood, but also the weather. So have fun with that one. Here's some examples here. I'll let you look at that in the review on your own time. All right, so we're going to quickly go through some of the mechanics here. They're wisdom-based, like the Fear Bowl getting a +2 to wisdom, and then the sub-races each have different +1s. Aging, similar to the Aarakocra, maturing pretty young, not living very old. Alignment, most Manu are neutral. They care for the well-being of their community, but usually as a matter of survival. And Manu mannerisms may seem chaotic, but they always have a specific reason for their behavior. That kind of goes back to the, singing and dancing around that most people would think is weird. All right, so looking at the size here, Manu are between 4 and 6 feet tall. That's kind of a large gap, but it's a product of the subraces. So the vultures here, the pakaroo, this first one we're going to look at, and that we'll look at more in depth, are much bigger than most of the other subraces. So they're on the high end of this, maybe even more than 6 feet tall. So this is kind of a general range, but nonetheless. Speed, 25 feet. That's what Aarakocra have. I think that's what Kenku have. So flying speed of 50 feet when not wearing medium or heavy armor. That's the same as Aarakocra. As far as languages go, it's common in one other language of your choice. I wasn't too into the idea of using Auran as one of their languages because that's kind of an elemental-based thing. And my thoughts for these guys is that they're probably from the material plane. All right, there are 6 main groups that populate the realm: Pakaroo, Kohuru, Kopara, Kahu, Kororo, and Kapeke. Those are the vulture folk, owl folk, parrot folk, falcon folk, pelican folk, and woodpecker folk. Choose one of these subraces. So let's take a good look at the vulture folk here. As a Pakuru, seeking and destroying undead is part of your nature. These imposing warrior people do not fear death, and the hunger to maintain its sanctity has driven them far throughout the realm. Pakaru's dark-feathered forms and bare red or gray heads inspire caution in even the boldest outsiders. So they get a +1 to Constitution, and, tapping into their traits here, the traits of actual vultures. Your open nasal cavity helps you detect carrion and undead targets. Once as an action, you can focus your sense of smell to locate any decaying or undead creatures within 1 mile of you and regain the ability to do so when you finish a short or long rest. That is based on one of the ranger's abilities, Primeval Awareness, I think. Or that might have been one of the ranger's abilities for detecting their favorite enemies. I can't remember, but each of the abilities in here, based on their niche in the ecosystem or their actual traits, are all tied to actual abilities that races or classes already have, but just with a little tweak on each of them that makes them unique. So I tried to do that because I didn't want to create stuff that's entirely different from what already exists in the game and that people would be unsure about how to use, but also to, in a way, hopefully make it more balanced so that people would be more open to using these abilities. But I highly encourage anybody to use those guidelines from the player's handbook. Take what you want, leave what you want. These rules are not set in stone. It's your game. Do what you want. Because, another thing I'll add here, as some of you might already be reading ahead, each of these sub-races has one ability that kind of makes them what might seem a little overpowered for most games. And that's kind of because I'm a giver as a DM. I like to give my players a lot to work with and then see what sticks. So likewise, put this whole thing in your game. If some of it seems too powerful, take an ability out, change it as you wish. But Pakuru here have gliding flight, so even though they have a flying speed of 50 when wearing no armor or light armor, and would normally have 0 flying speed when wearing medium or heavy armor, this sub-race has a flying speed of 25 even when wearing medium or heavy armor. I imagine them with a huge wingspan that can carry them pretty much regardless of what they're wearing or carrying. Their last ability here is called Pakuru Vitality, so they're immune to poison, both damage and a condition. That comes kind of from the Yuan-Ti race, and also resistant to necrotic damage. Just thought it made sense. Okay, now we're going to skim over the other sub-races just as kind of a teaser for the rest of the document. Kopara, Parrot Folk. As a Kopara, you have a knack for attracting attention with showy displays and vocal flair. While these tropical natives are the most diverse group among Manu, they tend to be vibrant and friendly to a fault, assuming everyone enjoys their vivacious company. These guys have a charisma bonus, their special ability comes from one of the bardic classes, and they have 1 or 2 skill proficiencies. Kohuru, the Owl Folk. As a Kohuru, your keen senses and sharp mind make you the top predator of the night sky. If one knows where to look, these reclusive people can be found in any environment, from the petite rusty gray tribes native to tropical and temperate forests to the bulkier pale tribes that roam cold regions, and the lithe, sandy-feathered Kohuru of the desert. Kohuru get an intelligence bonus, dark vision, but also sunlight sensitivity, but also an extrasensory ability that I'm sure many people will think is really overpowered, even though it's really minimal. Kapeke, Woodpecker Folk. As a Kapeke, finely tuned senses give you extreme awareness and a deadly accurate strike. Black and white with crimson feathered heads, Kapeke are not afraid to stand out in their woodland canopy homes. They get a strength increase, also get an extrasensory ability that, even though is minimal, many people will say is overpowered, and they have a natural weapon, their beak. Kahu, the Falcon Folk. As a Kahu, your incredible speed makes you a force to be reckoned with despite your relatively slight stature. With dark coloration on their upper side and lighter feathers below, Kahu blur like arrows across the open sky, scanning wide plains and ambushing prey from great heights. Kahu have an ability similar to Tabaxi, if that's a hint for anyone, and get a little bonus to their speed when they're not wearing any armor at all. Finally, the Kororo, the Pelican Folk. As a Kororo, your massive white wings carry you over the waves and spray of the sea. Wardens of land, ocean, and sky, Kororo are never far from the shoreline, preferring life on remote islands. They have some tweaks to their flying speed as well, and a swimming speed. And their special ability is maybe my favorite out of all of these. they can engulf smaller creatures. And that's not all, guys. There are some abilities that I did not mention. But overall, I'm really proud of how this came out, and I had a lot of fun producing it. If you liked what you saw, like the video, share it with a friend, and subscribe to see new videos like this every Wednesday. Most importantly, leave a comment below sharing your experience with flying characters. My goal for this channel is to generate discussion about D&D, and with this video, I'm actually incentivizing it. Here's that special offer. I will send a complimentary copy of Take Flight to the first 10 people to comment on this video. But this part is super important. After you comment, send an email to bobworldbuilder@gmail.com. I'll link it in the description or something. And include your YouTube username in that email. Otherwise, I'll have no idea who you are and how to send you a thing and to confirm that you actually commented on the video. If you want to support the channel and see a couple of those special abilities that I did not mention in this review, you can buy Take Flight on the DMs Guild, or if you buy anything from the DMs Guild or DriveThruRPG using the links in the description below, that helps the channel as well. As always, guys, thank you for watching and keep building.